Folks out there who all knew George H.W. Bush from so many different parts of his presidency, his time at the CIA, his time as vice president, all reflecting on the same man.
Leland, Ebony, good afternoon. You know, it is somewhat fortuitous to be here in this backdrop of the Reagan Presidential Library and the Reagan National Defense Forum this weekend, because all of these people, in some way, shape, or form, had some connection to the 41st president of the United States. And as you've heard from numerous people out here and all of the statements that have come out over the past few hours since his passing, there is just this admiration, respect, honor to look back at his life and legacy. Obviously, he was vice president to President Reagan, and some people looked at that time as he was in the shadow of this kind of larger-than-life figure, President Ronald Reagan, but came into his own as president and was his own man on a number of fronts when it came to foreign policy, domestic policy, and was the most experienced president as far as in different jobs that we have ever seen in the history of this country.
Certainly, the legacy of Bush 41 is vast, but particularly when it comes to national security and foreign policy. What seems to be the sentiment there in California as you are around so many leaders on that particular world stage?
That, Ebony, he had an ability to lead with dignity, a quiet kind of reverence of the military, but one in which he was leading with diplomacy. He, President Bush, was someone who reached out by phone, by letter to world leaders all the time. One of the interesting exchanges is that when the wall is falling, the Berlin Wall, obviously the result of a lot of years of fighting communism, President Reagan and world leaders and Vice President Bush, the wall is coming down, and Marlin Fitzwater, Brent Scowcroft, and others run into the Oval Office to prepare this big victorious speech about how democracy prevailed over communism in this moment. And President Bush doesn't want to do that. He says, "This is the last thing I want to do. I want to respond quietly because I don't want to dance on the top of the Berlin Wall." He had a concern for Gorbachev, Mikhail Gorbachev, and how he was going to react and how the Soviet Union was going to react to this moment. I think that maturity in that moment shows you, basically his foreign policy thoughts.
Brett, you talked about the sort of universal admiration and respect, and understandably so, from the people who worked with him and knew him and were both friends with him and served with him. Is there common themes about what earned that admiration, that respect, and the reverence that we're now hearing in so many of these statements?
I think it's how he treated people. He asked people questions. He listened to them. He was a really good listener. If you talk to folks who know him well, he wrote personal notes, Leland, a lot. He was a masterful handwritten note sender. And I think that what tells the most about President H.W. Bush, and actually this goes across all the Bushes, is if you talk to the people who worked inside the White House or the Secret Service agents on that detail, and they have nothing but high words of praise because President H.W. Bush engaged them every day. And when Barbara Bush died, the First Lady Melania Trump brought with her two members of the White House staff who had served under the Bush family, H.W. Bush and Barbara Bush, and went to the funeral. And that moment shows you, how much reverence and respect the people who worked for President H.W. Bush had for him.
Yeah. Brett, in just a bit, you're going to have a panel. You're out there in California, of course, for the Reagan Defense Forum. You're going to be doing a panel with Secretary of Defense Mattis. Can you give us some insight on what you expect to come of that conversation?
Yeah, it's just a one-on-one conversation with the Defense Secretary. Last year, I was out here and talked to then National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster. Similar Q&A, bounce around the world. Obviously, I'll get his reflections on the passing of the 41st president. But there are a lot of issues where Secretary Mattis obviously can make a lot of news and weigh in on big issues of the day as you look around the world and what the future of the U.S. military in a funding question going forward He doesn't give that many interviews, so we're honored to be able to do this, and we'll bring it to you live on Fox.
In almost every interview Brett does, there is some news to be made, so we'll look forward to that. Brett, thank you. We'll be standing by. Coming up in the next hour, Bret Baier will talk to Secretary of Defense James Mattis at the Defense Forum. Brett's going to spend the next hour or so prepping, and we're going to bring that to you live right here in its entirety on the Fox News channel. With that, we bring in Brad Blakeman. Traveled around the world with President George H.W. Bush, and then the family liked you so much they kept you around and put you back into service. Pick up where Brett left off about the family in its entirety. There is a level of decency that transcends the generations, and there was an expectation passed down to President H.W. Bush that he then passed down to Bush 43.
And to children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. There's that sense of decency, the sense that a life is not complete without a service component of helping others. George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush, I served them both, they practiced what they preached. I mean, they were genuine people who lived a credo that is really exemplary, and he mentored a lot of people and helped a lot of people.
You know, you get the sense, Brad, that they really understood their role, they being Presidents 41 and 43, that they were an example, right? Not just in their leadership as president, but as you say, as an example of American values, American family, and patriotism.
That's right. And, you know, you really know somebody, especially when they're a personality, how they are when nobody's around.
Right.
They were the same genuine, real, thoughtful people. It didn't matter if you were a prince or a potentate or an average citizen, you were treated the same. And they expected that same kind of behavior from the people who worked for them.
Well, that's important, sort of the level of expectation in terms of how, if they were going to be real and treat everyone with respect, that they demanded that of others. Speaking of times behind closed doors, we have some pictures of you with them in different places to go through and take us through those memories. What were your takeaways in these moments that we didn't see? What are the stories behind all of the accolades you just offered?
They were appreciative. They were appreciative of you helping them. They were appreciative of you helping others. They never took anything for granted. And their service was first class. Everything they did was the right way to do it. And they were thoughtful of others. And when I traveled the world with them, I've been to over 50 countries, the level of respect that they had not only for the United States of America, but for the President of the United States and the First Lady, every place we went to, you saw it.
Brad, you mentioned earlier that the president wrote one of your law school recommendation letters, which I think is spectacular. How did you ask the president to write that letter?
I didn't. It was by happenstance. We were at a fundraiser for heavy hitters in Florida, and he basically kicked out the heavy hitters. He was going to have dinner with the host, and then he said, "Come on, everybody, sit down." And he had a dinner for us, and he went around the table, he and Mrs. Bush. He said, "Okay, what's your future going to hold for you?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Vice President," I said, "I plan to go to law school." He goes, "Well, when you're ready, I'm going to write your letter of recommendation."
Offer.
So I was ready. I asked him, he did it, and there were two letters. There was a letter of recommendation and then a side note that said, "I hope this doesn't hurt your chances."
Well, clearly, it was very,
It
very
worked.
helpful.
I guess it depends on where you were applying.
Exactly, but that's the type of people they were.
Yeah.
And handwritten notes, I followed that. I followed their lead. I always followed up with a handwritten note. It's the most classy thing you could do. Today, people...
In an email society, people don't do it, but it's special.
It was even more important to do it, even today, is take the extra time, and it's worth its weight in gold because of the importance it has for the people who receive it.
Well, and noteworthy that he didn't write a presidential memoir. His book essentially was a collection of all of his notes. All right, Brad Blakeman with us. A lot more from you, Brad, over the next coming days. We always appreciate the insights and stories.
Pleasure.
All right. A little bit of other news to get to around the country and around the world. No deaths so far have been reported after those 2 earthquakes in Anchorage on Friday. Anchorage, of course, being Alaska's largest city. 300,000 residents there appear to have escaped unharmed. The city itself, though, is dealing with widespread damage. Jonathan Hunt was able to make his way there. Jonathan, I'm guessing it's early morning there Saturday, but almost always dark in Alaska during the winter.
Yeah, as dawn breaks on one of these terribly short winter Alaska days, Leland, Alaskans are still feeling some smaller aftershocks from that original 7.0 earthquake, and they're also getting to survey some of the damage. This, for instance, was an exit ramp from the main highway to the airport here in Anchorage. It collapsed when the earthquake hit yesterday morning. A car was actually stranded in the middle of that broken asphalt. You can take a look at one of the dramatic still pictures of that car, and we heard from people in a vehicle behind it that it just appeared to sink down as it went. Thankfully, those who were inside got out safely. But for every Alaskan who went through this earthquake, it was a big one. 7.0 is a very big earthquake indeed, and it was a frightening time for everyone here who felt it. Listen here to some of those.
We felt the rumble come through. We knew exactly what it was. We ran outside, you know, trucks shaking back and forth.
First time, yeah, just everything was shaking. It felt like the ground was doing a dance. And so Chad said, let's get out of here. So we ran outside, and as I was running outside, I could see the truck moving. And then we got in the street, and you're doing this number. So yeah, it was an adrenaline rush.
But the bottom line, Leland, is that the damage was not nearly as bad as it might have been. Some cracks in buildings, broken glass, a few ceiling tiles coming down on various buildings. The major damage has been to several of the highways. But as Governor Walker said yesterday in the wake of this earthquake, Alaskans really dodged a bullet here. It could have been so much worse. There has been no reported loss of life, only a few injuries. And Governor Walker said a lot of that is to do with the very strict building codes and the inspections that have been in place since the awful 9.0 earthquake of 1964. Those building codes, according to Governor Walker, saved a lot of lives yesterday, Leland.
Now you can see some of the damage to office buildings there. Jonathan Hunt in Anchorage as dawn breaks and the cleanup begins. Thanks, Jonathan. Ebony?
Coming up, the deep and lasting faith of President George H.W. Bush. We're going to talk to Franklin Graham, whose father, Billy Graham, was a close friend of the family. Also, we'll remember the match made in heaven between George and Barbara Bush.
Hi, I need a thriller for my wife.
Political or psychological?
Psychological.
Small town or big city?
Small town.
Methodist or mules?
Mules.
How's this?
Sign, no way.
Nobody knows thrill seekers like we do. Barnes & Noble.
Life happens everywhere. Like it never even happened, only happens here. The cleanup and restoration specialists at 1-800-SERVPRO and ServPro.com.
In these volatile markets, which investment are experts choosing for protection and profit? Stocks, real estate, bonds? None of the above. It's silver. It's trending higher. And if silver returns to its all-time high, that's over a 200% increase. Call now to get this free report. First-time callers also get this free 10th-ounce silver walking liberty.
We're going to look back a couple of years from now, and we are going to be amazed by how the price of silver has soared.
Call Lear Capital for your free silver report, plus a free 10th-ounce silver walking liberty, and get the indicator that over the past 40 years has accurately predicted silver increases of 200% or more.
The biggest mistake that investors make is they don't buy real gold and silver.
Don't wait. Ask how you can get up to $2,000 in free silver in your hand or in your IRA. This offer ends soon. Call 1-800-889-8000. 1-800-889-8000.
Everybody knows smoking is bad for you. But what you might not know is that sitting all day at your desk may be just as bad. It may lead to heart disease and back pain. But standing more and sitting less is better for you. It decreases back pain and increases circulation. That's why there's Varidesk, the sit-stand solution that helps people feel better and get more done. It's crafted to last a lifetime and comes fully assembled, ready to work. Get yours at Varidesk.com.
Gentlemen, ship's about to get real because World of Warships Blitz is available on mobile and tablets. Epic multiplayer 7-on-7 battles. Over 120 authentic naval ships. Launch attacks anytime, anywhere. Go to the App Store or Google Play and search Warships Blitz now.
Honoring President George H.W. Bush. First, Dana Perino shares her memories live at 4. Then, watch special live coverage with John Scott.
Warning, men should be 18 or older to purchase and use Ageless Male Max.
Guys, no more excuses. It's time to hit your prime by boosting your total testosterone with Ageless Male Max. And you can try your first 30-day supply free when you text 797979 and enter the word EGO. Many testosterone products can only boost what's called free testosterone, but that's only about 3% of the testosterone in your body. With the ingredient in Ageless Male Max, you get a boost in total testosterone. It's a no-brainer. You'll also support greater increases in muscle size and reduce body fat percentage. Plus, get a quick 64% boost in nitric oxide, which can be handy in the gym and in the bedroom. Don't settle for anything less than a total T-Boost. Get your free supply by texting 797979 and enter the word EGO. If your results are too intense, please decrease use. Text 797979 and enter EGO.
I do not fear what is ahead, for our problems are large, but our heart is larger. Our challenges are great, but our will is greater. And if our flaws are endless, God's love is truly boundless.
President George H.W. Bush talking about his faith in God and the faith he felt the country should have as well during his inauguration in 1989. The Bush family were really never shy and continue not to be shy, especially George W. Bush, about expressing their faith and maintaining a long-running friendship with the Reverend Billy Graham and his family.
His son, Franklin Graham, president of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, joins us live now. Reverend Graham, thank you so much for being with us. Now, you lost your father just earlier this year, Reverend. So can you speak a bit about how faith, of course, was paramount to you and your family coping with that loss, and maybe some words you would have now for the Bush family?
Well, I know where my father is. He's in the presence of God. And I believe that President George H. Bush today is with my father in the presence of God, because he had a faith in God. He believed in his son, Jesus Christ, that he took our sins to the cross, that he died for our sins. He believed that Jesus was the way, the truth, and the life, and he was the only way to God. He believed that. But he didn't wear his religion on his sleeve. He was very private about it. And it was a very private thing for him, but he and my father had many discussions about faith, about heaven, about future events. He was very interested in things like the second coming of Christ. And of course, my father had a big impact on his son, President George W. Bush. But we're very thankful for this president, for his friendship with our family. But we pray for the Bush family. We know what they're going through right now and the loss. Even though you expect it, you're never really ready for it.
Reverend, what is the legacy and the intersection of the legacy of your father and President Bush 41 that it is for the younger generation, whether it be you, whether it be George W. Bush, whether it be the country as a whole, should take with it?
Well, I think the legacy of George H. Bush, a good man, a gentle man, a kind man, a compassionate man, a man who dedicated his life to public service. I think he may be the last president we may see for some time who had those traits, and he was able to get along and work with people on the other side. I think of his relationship with President Clinton, who, of course, defeated him as he ran for his second term. And after the people of Haiti and the people that had been devastated by storms in Texas, the two men came and worked together, even though they may have disagreed on things. They put that behind them for the good of all Americans and for the good of humanity around the world. I wish we had more men like him. He was a great, great man. He'll be missed, and I know that his family is grieving at this time, and my love and condolences to all of them.
Reverend Graham, certainly we know that faith is tested. Could you speak a bit about any remembrances that you have of President George H.W. Bush having his faith tested while in the presidency, and how his faith and his belief system worked with him to get through those times?
Well, I know as he was entering the Gulf War, he was very concerned about sending young men and women into war. He knew what war was about. He had over 50 some combat missions in the Pacific. He was shot down. So he knew and understood war. But I know the night of where he was giving the order for the invasion of Kuwait and liberating Kuwait, he asked my father to join him and to lead our nation in prayer. And he was a man who believed in prayer, believed in the power of prayer. And he wanted my father to be with him that night. I don't know if it was to comfort him or just I know the two of them sat up late that night, and both of them had not just one prayer, but a number of prayers together.
Do you know what they were praying for? Was it for wisdom? Was it for safety of the troops? Was it for all of the above?
Say that again.
I said specifically, was there anything that the president was asking your father to pray with him about? Was it for wisdom? Was it for strength, for safety of the troops, all of the above?
Well, I think to pray for our nation and pray especially for the soldiers, the men and women that might be killed that night and the next few days. So he was wanting prayer for them and for the nation. But the two of them were friends, and they knew each other, they trusted each other, and you know, they vacationed together. And my father said to go to vacation with George H. Bush was a workout. He got up early in the morning, he went swimming, he played tennis, he went fishing, and then he came back, played golf. My father said you needed a vacation after the vacation.
Yeah, we had some pictures of of your dad and President Bush out on the boats in Kennebunkport as well. Reverend, we really appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now we're going to take a look back to remember moments of the incredible, remarkable 73 years of marriage between George and Barbara Bush. Barbara Bush spoke to our own Steve Doocy back in 2014.
I married the first man I ever kissed. When I tell this to my children, they just about throw up.
Right. They say that couldn't be true. I said, well, it is true. First person actually kissed me in public. It wasn't even dramatic, exciting, but I almost fainted. I was so excited.
And that was it?
That was it, for me.
That's the guy.
Mm-hmm. And still.
Yeah.
I just can't tell you how much I love him.
You know, Brad Blakeman was talking earlier about the handwritten notes that George H.W. Bush would send as president and throughout his political career. And that started long before. It started with love letters to Barbara Bush as he was off at war, and they had just met before he shipped off as a naval aviator, both to go to training and then to go overseas. There was the time that he was shot down, and for a long while they had no idea whether he had survived or not after being shot down. And Barbara Pierce then was waiting for word and would reread the love letters that they had sent back and forth to each other. I would read some of them now, and I have some of them, but I'd choke up. So I would encourage you over the next couple of days to do that. They're remarkably special, and you see what then brought about 73 years of marriage in the final days of her life in Houston earlier this year. President Bush spent his entire days holding her hands.
Well, certainly, Leland, on the social media, the kids call it relationship goals.
Yeah.
And my goodness, if 73 years of that type of love, I mean, you hear in 2014 still being actively in love with President George H.W. Bush.
For some people, 73 days is a long time.
Oh, no one here.
No, nobody here. But you look at the pictures of the two of them looking at each other the same way when they were young and in love before they got married and at Yale, and then all the way through their final times together in those videos. We'll leave you with some more pictures of the two of them and encourage you to read some of those notes.
Such an example.
We'll be right back.
Spread a little love today. Spread a little love my highway. Spread a little something to
Philadelphia cream cheese, made with fresh milk and real cream, makes your recipes their holiday favorites. The holidays are made with Philly.
1980 as vice president, not so much as president, but then several times as an ex-president, and he was a very special man. Interesting quality because he had tremendous grace, tremendous character, but also a steely ambition and very competitive, highly competitive, and those two went hand in hand.
Chris, I wanted to ask you about that because Bret Hume also said that he possessed both of those qualities, you know, a gentle kindness, but also that steely ambition you spoke about. Chris, from your observations, how did the president balance those two sometimes competing characteristics?
Well, if he was in a battle, he fought it, whether it was in World War II or political campaigns. And obviously in the Gulf War against Saddam Hussein, I don't think it was his natural character. I think his natural character was to be a gentleman, but he understood that sometimes his position, whether it was for the good of the country, whether it was his own political ambition, was challenged, and he wanted to win. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that.
You know, we keep hearing over and over, Chris, and I'm sure you do as you talk to folks who knew him so well out at the Reagan Library this week. Humility, dignity, honor, principle is these adjectives. What about him kept Washington from changing him? He spent so long here, he held so many offices, yet it appears as though the man who came into Washington is largely the same man in character who left.
Character. He was brought up in a very loving family. I think his mother was a huge influence on him. One of the things that he didn't like to do was to blow his own horn, and sometimes that didn't work to his political advantage. And he used to talk about the I word, and that his mother growing up used to say that we don't use the I word too much in this house, which is an odd thing for a politician, but he pretty much lived by it. You know, one of the first questions that I had after he passed was, where's the Bush family going to invite President Trump to the funeral? And there were reasons for that, because of the fact that they didn't like each other, and they were very upset with the way they felt Donald Trump had treated their son Jeb, low-energy Jeb, during the campaign. Obviously, President Trump raised a lot of questions about President Bush 43's decision to go into Iraq. And just a few weeks ago, Donald Trump talked about he didn't ever understood what the 1,000 points of light was really about. And so I wondered, would they hold a grudge, or would they understand that this was a state funeral and this was the current president of the United States? And then when I saw today that the Bush family has invited President Trump to attend and that he is going to attend, I realized there really was never any doubt about it. That's the way the Bush family rolled. They didn't hold grudges. Country, duty, honor came first. And so, of course, when President Bush 41 died, they were going to invite President Trump, the 45th president of the United States, to come.
Chris, what do you think is the lesson that Republicans, but really the nation as a whole, as we go into 2019 with Democratic control, Congress certainly, what is the lesson that we can all take from the example that you just spoke about of not holding these political grudges and moving forward with country first?
Well, we can talk about the lesson they can take. I don't know that it's the lesson that anybody is going to take, and I don't put this all on the Republican side any more than the Democrats, but I think Bush 41 understood that there were bigger purposes, and it wasn't a zero-sum game. It wasn't just a question of, for me to win, the other side has to lose. And he made a lot of compromises, compromises that took the country forward on a variety of issues. We don't see that much in Washington anymore. We don't see much compromising. We don't see much legislating. We don't see people going together, sharing, each side getting half a loaf to try to move the ball forward. That was very much the way that business was done under Bush 41. It's certainly not the way it is done. And again, I don't put this on President Trump, on the Republicans or Democrats individually. I put it on all of them. But that's a Washington, the Bush Washington is not the Washington we have today.
Yes, so very different. You have Dick Cheney, James Baker on. James Baker famous for saying that President Bush is one of the most underrated presidents in our history. What comes from these two men, you think, in President Bush's death that we may not have heard in his life?
Well, I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out. Interesting with Dick Cheney because they were very close during the Gulf War. Cheney was the Secretary of Defense back then and very much part of the war cabinet. They broke later when Cheney became vice president under Bush's son, Bush 43. He felt that Cheney had turned into too much of a hardliner. I think we'll probably talk about that a bit. And I very much want to talk to James Baker. They were very, very close friends. Just a quick story. Baker's wife, his first wife, died in the late 60s, early 70s. They were very close personal friends, Bush 41 and Baker. And Bush was running for the Senate in 1970, and he asked James Baker, his very close personal friend, to help run his campaign for the Senate. Now, Baker was, one, a Democrat, and two, really had never done anything in politics before. But I think that Bush saw this as a sort of grief therapy, and there was a very strong personal bond, and I suspect that's one of the things I'm going to want to explore. Yeah. This is not just a professional loss for James Baker. It's very much a personal loss.
Yeah, and that friendship and the professional relationship lasted for so many years. Chris Wallace, out west at the Reagan Library. Chris, we will see you tomorrow for Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, both of you,
sir.
Ebony and Leland.
Thank you, Chris. A live look now at the Reagan National Defense Forum, where Fox News anchor Bill Hemmer is moderating a panel there amongst some of those defense leaders. Let's take a listen.
That on average takes well over 100 days. I mean, the hiring process for the United States government is way too long, way too complicated, and very unrewarding. So it's first of all, it's hard to get the talent in. And then you have to confront the issue of the security clearance. And you're right, the timeline is easily over 365 days for a secret and maybe even longer for a top secret. So, look, we're putting obstacles in front of very capable people who want to serve. And if we want them to serve and deliver the best that the military can, either as military or as civilian, and we have very, very, very capable DA civilians, Department of the Army civilians, and we've got to make it easy for them to come and serve their country. And we're not doing that right now.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Or?
Well, I would just say that it is a huge problem. And by the way, that's across the entire enterprise. You've got Department of Defense, obviously, is the largest business in the world, and it has the largest bureaucracy to go along with it. And that's one of the problems of getting young people involved in, whether it's in the Department of Defense or some of our larger defense contractors, just the time and effort it takes to get a job and to be able to get on with your career. And it's not getting any better, and we need to work on it rapidly.
Couple questions.
If I would just add, it's definitely an impact in the industry. I mean, from large to small, medium-sized businesses, this waiting for security clearances, because it's, we have a lot of things that require classified work, security clearances, things that for our industry, and it's a long process. Now, we're working closely with the U.S. government on ways that we can streamline it. But you have to hire somebody, and then they have to do work that they really weren't hired for some period of time before they can be cleared and then go into the more interesting and important work that they were actually hired for.
I don't think most people are quite aware of that. I mean, you clearly are because this is your line of work. But perhaps it's a story that needs more attention and perhaps more urgency out of Washington on that as well. To the members of Congress, we have a question. To Secretary Esper, we have a question. And to Maryland, we have a question as well. To the Congresswoman and Congressman from Florida and California, respectively. STEM interest starts in the early years. I think you referred to that. What are we doing to improve our K-12 public education system to build interest in STEM? We have junior ROTC in some high schools that can promote citizenship and patriotism. How could we leverage existing programs?
Well, I think with education, and our community is really fortunate and an example of how we have a really robust higher ed education system, but that also has some reflections in our K-12, and it starts with making sure that you have preschool education and onwards and the integration of STEM. Unfortunately, the problem that when I talk to the K-12 schools and the administrators and teachers is that they feel that they are hamstrung in being able to teach STEM, and some people call it STEAM, including the arts piece, by the strict, burdensome requirements for testing. And so it makes it hard. And then, you know, all of the regulatory and oversight makes it hard for them to make curriculum changes. And so what you have is that we still have an education system that very much is teaching for a previous century without having made the evolution into teaching for the 21st century. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that more regulation is the path to getting these school systems moving in the right direction, preparing K-12. And we should think about our K-12 more as not just college prep, which I think...
And that's our Bill Hemmer. They're moderating a panel at the Reagan Defense Forum. That's a bit of it. But you can check out these panels in their entirety. They are all streaming right now live on Fox Nation.
All right, after the break, Democratic Congressman John Garamendi. Congressman, nice to see you. His thoughts on the passing of President George H.W. Bush, as we remember the 41st president of the United States. He's taken a lot of time with you.
Well, we were at the White House. It was one of those events where California legislators were in Washington doing our thing, trying to figure out what to do. And we had a White House reception. And we were all, reading. He came across the room, my young daughter, one of the youngest kids there, went up to her, bent down, talked to her, and you could just see this guy was connecting with youth of all ages. And I heard other stories today from other representatives who had similar experience. This was a guy that was not taken with himself or taken by the position, but he knew that he was a human, he was a father, and just very, very kind. He was also very courageous. Obviously in war, those stories are well known, but courageous in the political sector in a way that he did what the country needed to do, even though politically it was very damaging to him.
You talked about his time in war, but it was something that he would never talk about. In the words of Andrew Ferguson, someone who worked for him, he said trying to get George H.W. Bush to give a speech and talk about his time in war, getting shot down, volunteering to be one of the youngest naval aviators ever. He said an accurate account of his service, you can look up the details, would sound like bragging. And boy, now it's just the opposite in Washington. Where'd we all go wrong?
Well, I don't know where we went wrong. Just an extraordinary individual who was perhaps different from most. He knew who he was. He was comfortable in his own skin. He had obviously done what was courageous, and he knew it, but he didn't need to brag about it. And I think that's not uncommon among military men and women that have returned from combat that performed courageously or heroically. They're not going out and talking about it all the time. They did what they did. They did it. They took their own pride in it, but they didn't need to strut their stuff. They were quite happy with who they are in their own skin, satisfied with what they had accomplished.
Yeah, after he received the Distinguished Flying Cross, he said, people talk about, wow, you're a hero. friends in the plane with me were killed. I don't know the answer why I had been spared and what did God have for me. This is the last of a combat veteran to be president of the United States. If you think about those who preceded him, it all served in the military in different capacities. You think about Eisenhower, you think about Kennedy in that legacy as well. Is that service to country missing now with too many of our politicians?
No, actually it's not. The Republicans have, over the years, recruited and brought into Congress and the Senate veterans from really the Iraq I period. This year, the Democrats were very, very successful in recruiting and bringing into the Congress a whole cadre of very skilled veterans from the various wars of the last 2 decades. Many of them women who are actually serving in combat. And obviously, there's a senator who lost her legs in combat in Iraq I.
And to your point, all of them, when you talk to them, speak about their willingness to work across aisles with fellow veterans. Exactly. It seems to be a common theme among them. Congressman, appreciate you being with us, sir. Thank you, and for your memories as well.
Thank you.
Good to see you, sir.
Thank you for making this all of our memory.
Coming up, President Trump will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping as part of his trip to the G20 summit. We're going to take a closer look after the break.
Minimums and fees, they seem to be the very foundation of your typical bank. Capital One is anything but typical. That's why we designed Capital One cafes. You can get savings and checking accounts with no
beat tone when it comes to expectations for tonight's dinner. But Matt, what do you expect to come out of tonight's dinner conversation?
Well, first, let me start with my condolences to the Bush family and also reference why it's so important that we're talking about the G20 meeting today. This was a place where President Bush really shined on the international stage when he was president. I think the most important thing, as you referenced, this is a working dinner between the two leaders, and there is a lot to sort out here. And I think from a trade perspective, this could be a critical meeting. Now, a working dinner at something like the G20, and we host a lot of different heads of state and CEOs at the organization I run, Concordia, but this working dinner is really what it sounds like. It's meant to be a more casual encounter. It's not quite as official as some of the other types of bilaterals that can be formed. And so it's very much the two men coming together to see if they can get on the same page, especially about trade. So this is, we should be watching closely what's going to happen tonight.
Matt, do you expect any productivity? Some are saying that it would be productive if there is just a lessening of some of the tariffs and things like that have been ratcheted up here most recently.
No, high. I think it's in both leaders' interest to try and sort this out. Yep. So I actually think a working dinner like this alongside the G20 is the perfect way for these two men to come together.
All right, some optimism there from Matt Swift. Thank you so much, Matt.
Oh. Thank you.
And you think about somebody who did a lot of these dinners incredibly successfully was George H.W. Bush. Yeah. His relationships around the world were world-renowned in so many ways. That will come up along with so much else when Bret Baier sits down with Defense Secretary Mattis out in Simi Valley, California. You can see folks beginning to take their seats, and the news will continue from New York.
Okay, if I'm going to steal Christmas, I'm going to need some gear. What? Ebates? Max, where did you hear about this? Cashback? Sure. Hey, it actually worked. It's a Christmas miracle. Net launching candy cane? Oh, that'll work.
Sign up for Ebates and get cash back so every purchase is a steal. And see The Grinch in theaters.
The zip code you're born into can determine your future. Your school, your job, your dreams, your problems. But at the Y, we create opportunities for everyone, no matter who you are or where you're from. For a better us, donate to your local Y today.
Do you have any idea how your mattress affects your body and how well you sleep? Is it too hard or too soft, causing you to wake up with sore shoulders, back, or hips? Are you uncomfortable because you're too hot or too cold? Now you can get the total body support you need and the better sleep you want with the new MyPillow mattress topper.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. When I invented my new MyPillow mattress topper, I made it to have everything you'd ever want in a topper. My mattress topper helps give you the support you need, helps relieve your pressure points, and regulates your body temperature for you as an individual. It comes with a 10-year warranty. You can wash and dry the cover. It's made in the USA, and I back it with my 60-day money-back guarantee.
Go to MyPillow.com or call now to get your very own MyPillow mattress topper. Use the promo code and Mike will give you 30% off and 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free. Order now.
MyPillow topper delivers on its promise to give me a better night's sleep.
I can sleep all night through, and it's a miracle for me.
Mike's exclusive 3-layer design starts with a layer of MyPillow foam, providing you superior support and comfort. The second layer of transitional foam evenly distributes body weight and helps relieve uncomfortable pressure points for optimal comfort. Mike's ultra soft outer layer is a patented temperature-regulating cover that helps keep you at your ideal sleeping temperature all night long. Unlike other sleep systems costing thousands, the MyPillow mattress topper takes comfort to a whole new level without any wires, remotes, or moving parts. Call now or go to MyPillow.com to order your MyPillow topper. Use the promo code to save 30%. When you do, Mike will give you 2 of his standard MyPillows absolutely free. That's right, 2 standard MyPillows free and 30% off your MyPillow topper today. Order now.
I personally guarantee it's going to change your bed into the most comfortable bed you'll ever own.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
Wait! Where's Grandpa?
If you're making too many bathroom trips, pay attention. Super Beta Prostate has clinically tested ingredients that help reduce urges to urinate so you can enjoy more of life's best moments.
Mesothelioma, it's all we do. With 7 offices across the country, we are large enough to take on big corporations. Let us come meet with you. Call us at 1-800-500-1895. That's 1-800-500-1895.
On this weekend, the nation mourns and remembers the life and legacy of a remarkable American, a patriot, World War II hero, lifetime public servant, and of course, President George Herbert Walker Bush, the 41st President of the United States, passing away at the age of 94 last night. His life, a mirror of some of the most historic events that occurred in the 20th century. Hello, everyone. This is America's News Headquarters. I'm Eric Shawn.
And I'm Arthel Neville. The White House announcing that the former president will be honored with a state funeral at Washington's National Cathedral, which will be attended by President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. President Trump, who right now is in Buenos Aires, Argentina, for the G20 summit, canceled a news conference originally scheduled for this hour out of respect for President Bush and his family, and tweeted that he will wait until after his funeral to conduct it. President Trump also tweeted in part about the late president. His accomplishments were great from beginning to end. He was a truly wonderful man and will be missed by all. His son, former President George W. Bush, joining in the tributes pouring in today, praising his father as a, quote, man of the highest character. The entire Bush family is deeply grateful for 41's life and love, for the compassion of those who have cared and prayed for Dad. And another son, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, tweeting, I already miss the greatest human being that I will ever know. Love you, Dad. Former President Bill Clinton also paying tribute, quote, from the moment I met him as a young governor, invited to his home in Kennebunkport, I was struck by the kindness he showed to Chelsea, by his innate and genuine decency, and by his devotion to Barbara, his children, and their growing brood. Rick Leventhal is live from Houston now with more. Rick?
And Arthel, we're outside the gated community where President George H.W. Bush moved with his wife Barbara in the early 90s, shortly after leaving the White House, building a home here and spending his winters here in Houston and his summers, of course, up in Kennebunkport, Maine. And we've watched the tributes grow here on the gates outside the Bush home. You see some funeral wreaths have now been placed there along with other flowers and American flags. And the tributes continue to flow in as well from family, friends, and fellow presidents, including Bill Clinton, who writes, Hillary and I mourn the passing of President George H.W. Bush and give thanks for his great long life of service, love, and friendship. I am profoundly grateful for every minute I spent with President Bush and will always hold our friendship as one of my life's greatest gifts. Former President Carter and his wife Rosalind wrote, his administration was marked by grace, civility, and social conscience. Through his Points of Light initiative and other projects, he espoused a uniquely American volunteer spirit, fostering bipartisan support for citizen service and inspiring millions to embrace community volunteerism